All right, welcome to Tulips in Holland. This is inspired by Claude Monet's painting, Fields of Tulips in Holland. And one thing I love about this painting is that it has all the colors of the color wheel in it. So if you will take a crayon without the paper on it and use the side of your crayon, you can get a really nice sky texture effect that looks somewhat like Claude Monet's painting. And if you run the crayon side to side along the long edge of the crayon, you'll lay down a good amount of color. And if you slide it back and forth along the short edge, so to speak, you'll get a lighter color. So I'm sort of doing both. I want the richer blue to be up towards the top, and then I want to create a fade as we go down the page so it gets lighter as we get closer to the ground or the horizon line. So the other thing I like about this is it speeds up the coloring process a little bit, which is really nice, especially when you have a big space to fill in. So I don't just use this for skies, I use it for a lot of different places where I want to fill in a large area. And even if you go over the clouds just a little bit, it's not a big deal. In Claude Monet's painting, even the clouds have some of that reflection of blue in them, and so this is going to blend right in and look very nice. One of the things that's hard for me to do is to get away from the details, and that's a great thing that Claude Monet does because he is impressionistic, the father of Impressionism. And if you zoom in, all the detail is gone, and I like to do that as well sometimes, is zoom in very close to one of his paintings and see how the feeling of what it is changes. Particularly in this painting, in the red tulips, it almost looks like fire when you zoom in. Very interesting how his brush strokes make the marks that they make. And I love putting purple on these buildings in the distance and on the windmill. It just is such a unique way to portray a little bit of distance. It seems unrealistic in a way, and yet it really adds to the attractiveness and the liveliness of his work. And that next to this reddish orange roof that he has going on is really a nice pop and a nice change, especially when you have the blue sky there as well. Just a really nice play of complementary colors between the blue and the orange there. Now in the house we're going to do two different shades of brown or tan, and I try one here. It's not the best, it's a little bit light for my taste, but I come back over it later and I'll fill it in a little bit darker to mimic the shadow, the shadowed side of the building. And the colors that I'm using come from, I forget how many crayons are in a pack of the regular crayons that I'm using, and then I've got the multicultural pack as well. And there are so many just beautiful browns and shades of tan and almond and just beautiful colors in that pack that I love to use. So here we go. I came back a little bit with the darker shade of brown to give that shadowed side of the buildings, and that really adds to the depth. And you can do that too. So I think the next color we go with here is a yellow color. There is a lot of yellow in the fields, and even in the trees in the background there's some yellow in there. And just straight yellow is a little bit almost too bright for the feeling of the painting. And so even though I'm laying down this color of yellow, I'm not expecting that to be the final bit of color that I put down. So I'm kind of using it as a base and a marker for where I want my yellow to go. So the whole time I'm doing this, I'm looking at Claude Monet's painting just to sort of see where he placed color. And even though these pictures are not identical, this is actually one I hand drew inspired by his piece. I still use his piece to sort of determine where I'm going to put the colors. And that's one thing that I like for my students to do as well is to pay attention, even though it's not identical, to still be able to translate basic areas of color, even when the details are not specifically and exactly the same. It's a little bit of an abstraction for them, especially in first grade, but it still is very doable. And this is one of the more engaging projects where they just focus for quite a bit to get it right, and enjoy the process without feeling like they're going to mess up. So I think that that's one of the highlights of this particular project. So I'm coming back with some green, and this obviously is a mix of greens. And one of the great things about Monet's work is you will see layers of color, multiple different passes of color, multiple different combinations of color. And from far away, it can look like, oh, this is just a green patch, until you get up close and you see there's a variety of colors mixed in to that one green. And even some green on the top of the windmill, which we're doing, even though it's a different shaped windmill. It doesn't have the cap on it that Monet's has, but why not put some green in there? And then again, the yellow tan color down either side of the windmill. So you'll remember from previous activities that we like to layer colors so that we can get a whole lot more out of just your typical crayon box set. So, in some crayon sets they give you a yellow-green, but you can just as easily make a yellow-green by just taking a yellow and a green and layering. Now, one of the things I added to my picture as well are these very large tulips in the foreground, and the reason why is because it makes it a little bit easier for the students to identify with the aspects of background, middle ground, and foreground. By pushing those tulips up into the front and making them really large, it just makes a little bit more of a connection for the first grade developed eye to see. This is close up. This is in the foreground. So. And in here, I've noticed that students at this age do not pick apart these shapes as being in the background. So I have them watch the video and they start to see it a lot better. By watching this as they're coloring, they can then differentiate the stems of the tulips and the petals of the tulips, as well as the leaves. All of that becomes a little bit easier to see when they watch it being colored, and that helps them also to, I think, make a connection with how these shapes sort of play together. Much later on in the 5th grade curriculum, we start talking about how drawing one shape means that you're also drawing the outside shape at the same time. And that can be a little bit mind-boggling, even for the 5th grade mind. And this actually is a very early and subtle introduction to that idea, in a very playful way, because it really doesn't matter if you stay within the lines here. It just doesn't really matter. When I grade student work, I'm not trying to pick apart if everything is in the right place or anything, but just that they used all 6 colors, that they did notice certain aspects. Obviously, the sky is blue. Some of the buildings are purple. Some have an orangish colored roof. The green in the fields, the yellow in the fields, and the red in the fields, and the purple in the fields. And then I let them go sort of creative with the tulips in the foreground, because those aren't actually in the painting, and whatever they do, even if it looks like they just colored straight over the top of them without even giving them any thought, that's fine as well. I think this is not the place to really grade on that. It doesn't really make sense for them to get graded on these details that are so easy for me to see. But for them, it's all just introductory. And the fact that they're diving in and that they're doing it and they're making discoveries, all of those things are really what I think is the positive upside benefit of it. And of course, I go into these little details just because I think introducing them to it, those that look and observe and see this happening, they will pick these things up. They will recognize what I'm doing, and they will begin to do them at a very early age. And those that don't pick up on it are just trying to get the picture colored as best they can. It's fine. That doesn't, either way, a student who's super advanced and is keying in on these things gets something out of it, and a student hopefully who is not keying in on those details doesn't feel pressured like they have to accomplish it. I try very much in the classroom setting to take the pressure off of them and to allow them to enjoy it while still encouraging them to recognize certain aspects and certain details. So I've noticed that a good portion of students can keep pace with my coloring speed, but not all of them can. And so from time to time, I'll pause it, and some of the kids are like, no, don't pause it. And some of the kids are like, yes, pause it. And so I try to find that balance between the right speed for all the students. And it tends to work out well. I'm always impressed with their work, always impressed with what they're able to do. And other topics that we cover as we're doing this are just we revisit the color wheel. We talk about obviously the warm and cool colors, primary and secondary colors. How do we get our secondary colors? What two colors do we mix to make orange? What two colors for green? What two colors for purple? And all of these they'll be calling out as we're coloring. We talk about complementary colors, and that one can be really challenging at this age to just bring back from memory. And so if they're not getting it, I obviously just give them the answer, and then later on I'll bring up a color wheel and explain. And the way I explain is that colors that are pointing to each other are saying to each other, you're awesome. And the kids just absolutely love that. And I tell them to point to one another and say, you're awesome. And they point to each other and say, you're awesome. And I say, how do you feel when someone gives you a compliment? They're like, happy. And it's like, yes, you feel brighter, you feel better. And this is what colors that are complementary do. They make each other look brighter, and they say to each other, you're awesome. And so that's a really good introduction for them. I introduced that at kindergarten level, and the kids absolutely love it. They giggle, they laugh, they say to each other, you're awesome, you're awesome. Even later on in the hallway when we're not in art class, they'll come up and say, you're awesome. And it's just a lot of fun and good connections for them, and just providing a place where they really enjoy art and have fond memories of it early on is very, very, very important. And now I'm going a little bit over the top here. I'm adding a little bit of texture into the flower areas, and I'm starting to pay attention to the fact that he has these green patches going through his red section, which I would imagine symbolize the stems and the leaves and everything, although when you really look close at it, you can't differentiate exactly what they are. They're just patches of green. But I none of this, I don't expect any of that from the students at all. I'm just sort of enjoying the coloring process and having fun with it. And I recommend that for anyone. If this looks like a fun coloring page for you, definitely head over to the website and pick up a copy of it for yourself and share it with a friend. Hang it on your refrigerator. Have your own little art gallery going, and have a good 20-minute break and rest your mind and allow your creative juices to flow for a bit. It can be very therapeutic and helpful. And I would say, in my estimation, about 20% of the students attempt to do the same kind of shading that I'm doing with the tulips here, where they do two different colors. They layer the lighter color down first and then the darker color second. But all of this came from their time with me in kindergarten, because we work on mixing our primary colors to get our secondary colors. So for those that makes sense, like it clicks for them, they just carry that into the next year and carry that into the next lesson, and you start to see that become a part of their toolkit, which is really rewarding. And then, others that might not grasp it right away see over time their classmates are doing that, and some of them start to pick up what their classmates are doing, and they implement it, and they get a grasp of it, and all of that for the better. That's one of the reasons why I encourage parents to keep their children's artwork in some kind of binder or folder, because as they go through this curriculum, there is a definite progression of skills. They're constantly being given tools that may not in the immediate here and now click, but they start to be repeated, and they certainly click later on as they get repeated. And it's always nice to be able to go back and look at how their development happens through each assignment. So we're just putting on the finishing touches here. And usually at the end, I'll pause the video for a little while so that my friends who want to keep going can keep coloring, and those that have sort of spent themselves, so to speak, on coloring this and are ready for a new something to do, I'll have some free time activities ready to go. And those are also on the website. One of the most popular ones are the foldables. The students really enjoy those. So, yeah, all the little finishing bells and whistles here just to satisfy my urge to make it look crisp and clean. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you would like to print out this activity, it is available at mrhen.com, and there is a link in the description below. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as share with any teachers or homeschooling groups eager to help their art students grow. Thank you again, and have a great day.